Welcome friends. Today we deal with contemporary Indian philosophy. Indian thought is one that has continued unhindered since the time of the Vedas. Indian philosophers have meditated upon the nature of the self and the cosmos and detected social and political ideologies. Indian philosophy has been driven by the incessant search for ultimate truth and has been characterized by the unity of metaphysics, cosmology and axiology. From the metaphysical principle follows the axiological ideal of liberation. Indian philosophy has looked upon liberation as the ultimate goal of all human beings. The emergence of contemporary Indian thought can be traced to the 8th decade of the 18th century. The contributions of Rajaram Mohan Roy mark the first awakening of the Indian consciousness from the slumbers of several centuries of slavery from Mughal and later British rule. Rajaram Mohan Roy was impressed by the concepts of social liberty and equality in the West and felt that the same liberty and equality should be created in Indian society. He raised his voice against the exploitation of the backward classes, particularly the women and the untouchables, and evil social practices like the burning of the widow in the pyre of her husband. He worked hard to abolish social evils and bring about social and political reforms through the enactment of new social legislation. After the efforts of Rajaram Mohan Roy, India witnessed several waves of social and political reforms which continued to the 20th century. Great human beings are born when the nation faces a challenge and fails to answer it by the usual and normal means. The Bhagavad Gita has emphasized that whenever human beings are found insufficient, there is some divine interference, some divine incarnation to overcome the difficulties. After the failure of the War of Independence in 1857, India witnessed the birth of such souls. They were not only great social and political reformers, but also great philosophers. Rabindranath Tagore was born in 1861, Swami Vivekananda in 1863, M.K. Gandhi in 1869 and Sri Aurobindo in 1872. The fame of these illustrious thinkers did not confine to India alone, but spread throughout the world. Salient features of contemporary Indian philosophy. Unity in diversity. The metaphysical principle of unity in diversity influenced the contemporary Indian thinkers as they considered individual liberty and variety as contributing to the richness of national solidarity and unity. One finds a fundamental unity in Indian culture that one may miss out if he concerns himself only with the external peripheral aspects of Indian culture. Such a person may fail to find unity in diversity, the symbol in the complex and the individual in the common. Some critics have pointed out that India lacked cultural unity in the past and its current cultural unity is the outcome of recent events like the colonization of India by the British. Contemporary Indian philosophers have corrected this misconception and have established beyond doubt that the cultural unity of India is as old as Indian culture and civilization, and that a profound sense of unity has always accompanied all notions of diversity. It was on the basis of this metaphysical principle that they advocated the principle of unity in diversity in the international field. Although most of the contemporary Indian thinkers were internationalists, they considered the maintenance of the individuality of each nation necessary for the richness of humanity. Each nation has to make a significant to human fraternity through its unique characteristics. Therefore, for the well-being of humanity, we need not abolish the individualities of nations, but rather should encourage them. The concept of Swadharma. In contemporary Indian philosophy, the concept of Swadharma is a key that unravels individual, social and international ideals in Indian social philosophy. Swadharma is an ancient Indian ideal according to which the objective of everything is to evolve and grow according to its own inner principles. Not only among living organisms, but everywhere in nature, everything has to follow its own inner nature. Indian philosophers have not made a gulf between facts and ideals and individual and social good. The Bhagavad Gita proclaims that the destiny of human being lies in becoming a conscious instrument of the universal divine process. Thus, every individual, every class, every nation and humanity as a whole ought to follow their Swadharma without caring for results. Swami Vivekananda, Tagore, Sri Aurobindo and Gandhiji considered Swadharma as the key to understand human duties in the national and international fields. Be thyself and know thyself are the highest philosophical principles known in the Eastern or Western traditions of philosophy. In order to be thyself, you will have to first know thyself. In the field of social philosophy, Swami Vivekananda, Tagore, Sri Aurobindo and Gandhiji carried out the important function of letting the Indian masses know themselves. They reminded the masses of their great past, condemned their present oppressed condition and encouraged them to come out of it and achieve the ancient glory. They were not revivalists since they did not ask the masses to return to the old, but wanted to modify the ancient thinking according to new circumstances. Idealistic and spiritualistic traditions. Most of the contemporary Indian philosophers are idealistic thinkers. They interpret the world as the play and evolution of the spirit. Matter, life and mind are regarded as the manifestations of the spirit in this world. In the words of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, spirit is the basis and the background of our being, the universality that cannot be reduced to this or that formula. The goal of contemporary Indian philosophers, like their ancient Upanishadic counterparts, is the realization of Brahman. Brahman is the fullest expression of the spirit, of which the self and God are manifestations. Contemporary Indian philosophers have acclaimed ancient Vedanta philosophy as the basis of their philosophical ideas. They are Neo-Vedantins and the absolute idealism of Vedanta is their locus standi. Spiritual goal of life. The seers of classical Indian philosophy have concluded that the primary duty of man is to know himself because that is the only way in which the truth of this world and hereafter can be known. It is for accomplishing this that they have emphasized introversion. Sri Aurobindo has rightly stated that spirituality is the key to understand the Indian mind. It is spirituality that has helped Indian culture to retain its originality in world culture. With the only exception of Charvaka, the orthodox and heterodox schools of Indian thought are imbued with spirituality. Contemporary Indian philosophy regards the world as the evolution of the spirit. This evolution is spiral in nature because that is the characteristic of spiritual dynamism. This spiral is the integral movement characteristic of the spirit. Synthetic approach to religion. Indian culture since ancient times has had a religious orientation. The concept of dharma ties Indian thought together. It explains the functions of different human beings, social institutions and associations. Some critics have interpreted the religious orientation of Indian culture as a kind of escapism. However, this criticism is unfounded. Indian seers believed in a synthetic relationship between this world and the world hereafter. Religious tolerance has also been an important feature of Indian culture. Hinduism has forever assimilated foreign elements into indigenous culture. Inner revolts such as Buddhism arose within it and gradually subsided and merged into it. Hinduism has accepted many different religions into its fold and has only gained by it. This synthetic approach in Indian culture has been expressed in a synthetic approach to religion found among contemporary Indian philosophers. They have exhibited an integral viewpoint in their synthetic approach to religion. They have pointed out that the contribution of each great religion of humanity and emphasized their fundamental unity. In his Religion of Man, Tagore emphasized humanism as the core of all religions. He pointed out that the essential similarity in the teachings of the pioneers of all religions. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa has pointed out repeatedly that God is one though his forms are many. He justifies his perspective with the examples of the changing colors of the chameleon, the elephant and the blind man and toys of sugar and clay. Devotees have held different relationships to the same God. On the basis of this, he has pleaded for the removal of all hatred and differences. It is meaningless to distinguish and differentiate people on the basis of religion according to him. Gandhiji has also pleaded for religious tolerance. His contention is that religions differ only in their approaches, their essence is the same. Just as God is one, though his names and forms are different, religion is also one, though practices and beliefs may vary. All religions are derived from the one God. In his Eastern religion and Western thought, S. Radhakrishnan searched the heart of each great religion to discover the intuitive basis from which it springs and thus arrives at the unity in integral intuition. Thus, contemporary Indian philosophers have emphasized harmony between various religions, but have equally upheld the value of their diversity. Intuitive method in philosophy. While pointing out the limitations of the empirical, rational and critical methods in philosophy and accepting their limited value, contemporary Indian philosophers have utilized intuitive method in philosophy because spiritual intuition is the only method to delve deep into the recesses of the spirit. Sri Aurobindo, Dr. Radhakrishnan and Bhagavan Das have distinguished spiritual intuition from mental, vital and physical or instinctive intuition. However, they have also admitted the role of reason in life and thought. As a higher instrument of knowledge, intuition does not negate, but fulfills the lower instruments such as reason, instinct, etc. Spiritual intuition also permits an integral view of life and its deeper realities. Trend of reforms. In ancient Indian philosophy, liberation was conceived as a release from the sufferings and miseries of mundane existence. Therefore, the fundamental idea behind salvation is the betterment of the present lot of man. Contemporary Indian philosophers believed that the concept of moksha as a release from this world to some other world is not suited to the modern temperament and hence not suited to the spirit of the times. In the modern world, such an aim of life would be considered as selfish and escapist. This is the reason why Sri Aurobindo has given the concept of universal moksha. Contemporary Indian thinkers consider it essential to develop the spirit of man and to make the world a vale of soul making. With such an aim in view, Rabindranath Tagore set up a spiritually oriented system of education at Shantiniketan, and Sri Aurobindo set up his Pondicherry ashram to promote spiritual culture. Even as a monk, Swami Vivekananda aimed at social uplift and resurgence as a precondition for the awakening of true religious spirit. Political consciousness. In contemporary Indian philosophy, socio-political philosophy takes precedence over spirituality. The life of spirit can grow only in a congenial socio-political atmosphere, and therefore, unless this is achieved, all talk of spirituality goes in vain. Most of the contemporary Indian philosophers were born in an age when India was under foreign domination and a wave of political and social renaissance had overtaken their minds and spirits. Therefore, contemporary Indian philosophers were not only philosophically active, but were also keenly aware of political and social awakening and their duties thereof. That is the reason why Gandhiji, Tagore and Sri Aurobindo were in the forefront of political struggle for national independence. After India became independent, Plato's dream of a philosopher king was realized in the form of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan's ascendancy to the post of the President of India. Thus, all contemporary Indian thinkers were more or less involved in Indian politics. They made significant contributions to politics by injecting fresh and fertile ideas into Indian politics. The role of religion in politics, the concepts of non-violence, civil disobedience, trusteeship and nationalism are some of the crucial contributions of contemporary Indian philosophers to Indian politics. Contributions to art and literature. Contemporary Indian philosophers had a keen interest in art and literature, and most of them made important contributions to art and literature. Rabindranath Tagore was an exemplary poet and was awarded the Nobel Prize for Poetry. Similarly, Sri Aurobindo was a poet and literator par excellence. The prose style of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan earned him an eminent place in English literature. The autobiography of Gandhiji is regarded as a piece of literature equal, if not better, to St. Augustine's Confessions. It is the literary and artistic strain in these philosophers that disposed them towards a philosophy of humanism. Humanism is the most important characteristic feature of philosophy in the modern times. After many centuries of philosophical thinking and mediation, human beings have learned that the end of all human activity is the improvement and development of man, and that human beings are not to be sacrificed to any external power, be it God or a political or social institution. Life today has become so complex and involved that no philosopher considers it wisdom to shut his eyes to the besetting socio-political cultural life of man. Therefore, contemporary Indian philosophers have never failed in bringing out to the forefront humanistic values and ideals in their philosophies. Integral perspective of human personality and education. Contemporary Indian philosophers have looked to human personality from an integral perspective to discover the inner kernel which is often missed by social sciences. They emphasized the spiritual aspect of man as an integrating principle which alone can boost his future evolution. It is because of an integral theory of human nature that Sri Aurobindo, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Tagore, Gandhiji and Bhagwan Das have advocated a multi-sided scheme of education that includes physical, moral and religious education, true to the spirit of Indian culture, but one which also incorporates the latest scientific truths. The aim and principle of a true national education is not certainly to ignore modern truth and knowledge, but to create our foundations in our own belief, our mind and our own spirit. Harmony of nationalism and internationalism. Most of the contemporary Indian philosophers have been leaders who have been responsible for the rise of nationalism in India. They have relentlessly criticized and opposed foreign rule. They have upheld ideals like Swadeshi and Swadharma. Sri Aurobindo gave befitting replies to Western attacks on Indian philosophy. Bhagwan Das has compared ancient Indian socialism with its modern Western counterpart and have pointed out the virtues of the Indian system. Yet, all contemporary Indian philosophers have internationalism and the ideal of world brotherhood. This was possible because of their integral perspective of social and political philosophy, in which the higher does not contradict the lower, but fulfills it. Tagore, the poet of Indian nationalism, established a truly international university called the Vishwabharati. Sri Aurobindo also established an international university at Pondicherry. Meeting of extremes. Contemporary Indian philosophy can be characterized as a meeting of extremes. This is because its spokesmen have had a wide and deep knowledge of Western science, art, literature and culture and a first-hand contact with the West. Hence, they could compare Eastern and Western traditions of thought and arrive at an integral viewpoint. Idealism and realism, ancient Indian ideals and modern Western principles, nationalism and internationalism, individualism and socialism all find their points of convergence in the writings of contemporary Indian philosophers. They drew inspiration from the ancient scriptures like the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. They presented ancient Vedanta in a new garb. The modern ideal of activism was reconciled with the ancient ideal of renunciation in their works. They synthesized spiritual truths with scientific discoveries. They pleaded for a greater union of the East and the West in terms of culture and religion. They advocated a world government and a world state so that humanity can march in its onward progress as a unified world community. Now, let us summarize what we have discussed. Every philosophy is a product of its age. Contemporary Indian philosophy is no exception to this fact. It can be understood only in the backdrop of the socio-cultural condition from which it emerged. Its value lies in the fact that it provided the much needed change that Indian philosophy was craving for after centuries of stagnation. It is critical and self-reflective and carries a unique zest for reformation. Contemporary Indian philosophers provided the leadership for a nation that was struggling under foreign rule. Contemporary Indian philosophy touched the lives of millions of people in India and abroad and inspired the masses to awaken from the slumbers of orthodoxy and superstition. It was also mature, for it understood the dangers inherent in grafting a complete set of foreign values in the Indian soil. It rather adopted an approach of synthesis that combined the best of the past and the present, the West and the East. Now, try to answer the given questions. Number 1. Is contemporary Indian philosophy nothing but an old wine in a new bottle? Discuss. Number 2. What is the attitude of contemporary Indian philosophers to the developments in science and technology? Number 3. How do contemporary Indian philosophers approach religion? Number 4. Does nationalism stand in opposition to internationalism? Explain in the context of contemporary Indian philosophy. Here are some books for your further reference. Number 1. Lal Basant Kumar, Contemporary Indian Philosophy, Delhi, Motilal Banarsidass, 2010. Number 2. Sharma Chandradar, A Critical Survey of Indian Philosophy, Delhi, Motilal Banarsidass, 1987. Number 3. Margaret Chatterjee, Contemporary Indian Philosophy, Motilal Banarsidass, Delhi, 1998. Number 4. Eastern Religions and Western Thought, S. Radhakrishnan, Oxford University Press, New York, 1993. Hope that you have enjoyed this session. We will meet again in the next session. Thank you.